Here we go. The whole season coming down to this. They're going to have to do something from the outside now. It's Page off balance. Puts it. Oh! Impossible! How did he do that? 4.7 seconds. Villanova trying to go length of the court with Archie Diacono. 3 seconds at midcourt.
Jenkins
gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A national championship buzzer beater for the title. As good as it gets. Wow! Oh my goodness! Dreams to come true.
4 weeks from tomorrow, 68 teams will begin their journey on the road to the Final Four, each with the goal of winning this year's national championship trophy. And that buzzer beater feels like it was yesterday, doesn't it? Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Gumbel. Welcome to the NCAA March Madness Bracket Preview Show. For the first time ever, the NCAA Selection Committee will reveal its in-season top 16 seeds as of today, as of right now. Joined as always by my studio mates, Clark Kellogg and Seth Davis. And it is our pleasure to welcome Mark Hollis, the chair of the Division I Men's Basketball Committee and Athletics Director at Michigan State University. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here.
The obvious question, why are we doing this now?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One is transparency, is putting out what we do, how we do it, what the bracket looks like, and how it's put together. Two is a collaboration with the NABC, the Basketball Coaches Association, asked for this list of 1 to 16, and we felt like it was something good to do and give the public something to get excited about.
Mark, you talk about transparency. How are the teams dropped into the bracket?
So one of the things you'll see as we put the bracket together is the geographical preference. It's each team on, the first team on each line is going to have an opportunity to be as close to home as possible, with a few exceptions, and we'll explain those as we go along.
Well, you know, they aren't the only ones who are preparing for the big day. We also need the practice for Selection Sunday coming around. So let's start this off with the overall #1 seed, Mark.
The overall #1 seed is the Villanova Wildcats, and they'll be traveling to the east in New York.
And how much of a consensus was Villanova as the overall #1 seed?
I think what you'll find with the whole line at #1, very much a consensus. We spent 2 days putting this bracket together, and for the most part, the #1s were solid throughout that process.
Might be the last time we agree from this show, because I also have Villanova as the overall #1. And I know, Mark, you have a new wrinkle in the procedures this year, that Villanova gets to choose where they go, not only for the regional, but the sub-regional. I assume Jay Wright wants to be in New York?
We do. They were asked, and New York was their selection for the regional, and Buffalo for the first and second round. So we would slot those in as we will in March when that comes around.
All right, so Villanova is the overall #1. Let's check out the other #1 seeds.
So the overall #2 is Kansas, and they will travel to Kansas City, a short trip in the Midwest region. The overall #3 is Baylor. Baylor will play in the South region in Memphis. And Gonzaga will round out the one line. They're the 4th overall seed, playing in San Jose in the West.
You look at Gonzaga undefeated, the 4th overall #1 seed. How does that juxtapose itself?
Well, I think you look at Gonzaga, an unblemished record is obviously something that put them on the one line. There's lots to play. I think there's going to be movement of many. We've got 1,300 games yet to play here, but that put them on the line. I think those ones are very solid on that line as of today.
Yeah.
Well, I know you don't want to project ahead. I am surprised that Gonzaga is the overall 4. I would have had them closer to a 2. And it raises the possibility that they could be undefeated on Selection Sunday and not be a 1 seed. So in the end, how much separation was there between these 4 teams and the rest of the top 16?
Again, the committee is basing this upon results that we have today, and the separation is great. I mean, the ones are clearly the ones, and there was nobody really that was going to jump.
So they were not close to a 2 in this discussion, you're saying?
Not at all. Not at all. And none of the 2s were really a conversation on the one line.
All right, speaking of the 2s, let's reveal the #2 seeds, beginning with the overall #2 pick, Mark.
So the overall 5 seed is North Carolina. And North Carolina is going to be in the South region in Memphis. And let me explain that real briefly. They are the top 2. We did not want to match them against the top 1 in Villanova, a rule that we got to put in the bracketing principles about 2 years ago. So they will go to the South. The overall 6 is Florida State. Florida State will be in the Midwest. They'll be in Kansas City. Louisville is the overall 7. They are in the East. They'll play in New York. And Oregon is the overall 8. Oregon will play in San Jose in the West region.
We're talking process, but looking at Florida State, how much does conference strength play into where they end up on the seed line?
Well, I think conference really isn't discussed when we go through the teams. It's kept separate. What was important is as you look at Florida State, they were 8-1 against top 50 teams. And I think that was an important note that separated them into that line.
So people are seeing how this process works for real. So first of all, geography and the fact that teams from the same conference, if you can avoid it, are not in these 4 groups. So putting Oregon as your number 8 overall is huge because that means that Arizona and UCLA cannot be sent to San Jose. And I know that the Thursday night result of Oregon losing at UCLA was factored into this decision. So why is Oregon your first team out of the pack?
Yeah, and it's a great point. I want to emphasize it again. The first 4 teams in the 16 from any conference have to be in separate regions. So that's one point to make. At this point, as you're looking, we don't have all the data points like we will in March. So head-to-head common opponents became important. The head-to-head between Arizona and Oregon was looked at. I think very shortly after the break, we'll see how close they will be.
All right, guys, 8 seeds down, 8 more to go. We will step aside here for just a moment. When we come back, we'll reveal the rest of the top 16 seeds after this. NCAA March Madness Bracket Preview on CBS is sponsored by Coca-Cola. Taste the feeling. AT&T. And by the Quicksilver Card from Capital One.
Whatever they need, he steps up.
Down from Brunson. Heart attacks off the window. DiVincenzo. Wow, he looked confident. Unbelievable.
Welcome back to Studio 43, everyone. The defending national champion Villanova Wildcats are the projected number 1 overall seed. Before we move on with the seeding process, let's quickly recap the top 8 seeds for you. Overall, number 1 is Villanova in the East, followed by Kansas in the Midwest, Baylor in the South, and Gonzaga in the West region. The number 2 seeds, North Carolina at 5, Florida State at 6, Louisville at 7, and Oregon is at 8. Let's move on now to the number 3s, beginning with the overall number 3, Mark.
So let's go with the 9th overall seed, and that's Arizona. And here is the answer to the question. They cannot go west because Oregon is placed there. So they go to the next closest location, which is Kansas City in the Midwest region. From there, we'll go to the 10th overall seed, which is Virginia. We're placing them into the West region in San Jose. The reason for that is back to Seth's comment. We don't duplicate the top 4 teams in the list of 16. So with Virginia and the ACC having teams already in the South, Midwest, and East, Virginia goes to the West. Florida is our 11th overall seed. They will play in the South region in Memphis. And the Kentucky Wildcats, they go east to New York as the final on the 3 line.
Okay, with the number 3s in place, it's conceivable, it's a possibility that there is a Louisville-Kentucky matchup in the Sweet 16. Conspiracy theorists, their heads are exploding all over the country.
Right.
Did you do that on purpose?
You can look at how the bracket goes, and when you're in the room in March, that's about as fast as it goes. It's very, very straightforward. And it's very geographical based.
Okay, speaking of Kentucky, our Bill Raftery caught up with the head coach of the Wildcats, John Calipari.
Coach, the selection committee has you the number 3 seed in the East. How do you feel about that?
I'm happy the way we're defending. Can we just mark that in a marker so it stays there and we don't have to worry about stuff? No?
No, I don't have the answer for you.
Okay. One thing I'm happy about, and I know there's some coaches that are, why are we doing this? But it's transparency. Now, people are going to play into seeds, play out of seeds, and it gives a real transparency to the whole prospect of what's going on. I'm excited about it, and I think it's good that we're doing it.
From a guy who's been very transparent most of my life, thank you very much.
Coach Cal says he knows that there are some coaches that have had their doubts about it, but the majority of them say what?
I think for the most part it's very positive because of the transparency. And people may think of March Madness and Selection Sunday as something that ought to stand alone, and it still does. This is just an opportunity for us to get excited about the college basketball tournament a little earlier.
All right, that takes us now to the last 4 remaining seeds. Who's your overall top number 4?
So the 13 overall seed is Butler. Butler will be in the South region, the closest location to Indianapolis. 14, West Virginia. I'm going to place them and then explain why in a moment, but West Virginia will play in the West. They will be in San Jose. UCLA is the 15th. They're going to New York. They'll play in the East. This is the only location where UCLA can play on this line, and it's important to the committee with the principal not to move them off of a seed line. The reason for that, Butler is already placed in the South. You have Arizona and Oregon out of the Pac-12 conference that are already assigned to the other 2. That shift placed West Virginia into the West region, places UCLA into the East. Duke, the final team into the 16, will play in the Midwest in Kansas City.
Well, we've got the 16 revealed. I'm curious as to which teams out there just missed making this list of 16.
And it's a great question, and it's a great question at this moment in time because the data points we have are very short, many games yet to play. Creighton, Wisconsin, you've got Purdue. Yeah. Those teams really are in the mix of everything else that we're talking about here. Cincinnati is another. Teams that are very close, and I can't express enough. We don't have enough data points to really make those lines of separation. So we've listed the 16, but we've also had a lot.
1,300 games left to be played.
1,300 games left to play.
So Greg mentioned.
And don't buy your airline ticket.
Exactly. That's it. Or at least make them refundable. Greg mentioned all the disappointed conspiracy theorists. I just want to point out we have a Big Ten athletic director as chair of the committee, and no Big Ten teams in the top 16. I think that might be a conversation point. But look, we've got a beautiful big board. The studio lights are on. We're all here. Why not just do a whole bracket?
The reason not to do a whole bracket, 32 teams will enter the tournament as AQs. We don't want to get into a position of having to forecast, guess where there are upsets, who's going to win. This is what was requested by the NABC. I think after we talked through it, it was something we're comfortable delivering. I think it will add excitement, but it's also going to add a lot of conversation leading up to March Madness and Selection Week for real. So we're excited for that.
And let's be very clear, this bracket is valid for how long?
Tonight.
We are grateful to the selection committee for sharing this first ever in-season look at the top 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament bracket. We especially want to thank the chair, Mark Hollis, for joining us today for the reveal. Thank you so much.
Thanks
we'll
so
see you. Did you like it enough to come back and visit us again sometime?
I may be back.
About 4 weeks.
Yep.
Do it all again for real in 4 weeks on the NCAA Basketball Championship Selection Show. Join us Sunday, March the 12th for the exclusive announcement of the entire 68-team field. We aren't done yet. When we come back, we'll project the rest of the bracket.
One shining moment for the championship. Yes! Villanova, the national champions.
Welcome back to our New York studio in the NCAA March Madness Bracket Preview Show. Why stop at only the top 16 seeds? Let's continue with our projection for the rest of the field. Joining us now to help us fill in the blanks is our own CBSSports.com bracketologist, Jerry Palm, who has correctly projected 99% of the tournament field over the last 4 years. He'll be filling out studio lottery tickets momentarily. Does know a thing or two about the process. Let's have a look once again at the 16 seeds unveiled by the NCAA Selection Committee. You got any gripe with this?
Well, I think Gonzaga as the 4th overall #1 is probably a bit harsh, especially if the committee likes Florida as much as they did, because that's one of their big non-conference wins. And I think Florida personally is too high. Their resume compares more favorably to Wisconsin and Purdue, who you will notice is not on this list.
All right, let's reveal your 16-team bracket in the East and see how you filled out the remainder after Villanova, Louisville, Kentucky, and UCLA.
And here you see a 7-10 game that would make a great Rose Bowl, but I want to talk about Purdue, mostly because I have to as a grad. The Boilermakers, one of the reasons why you didn't see any Big Ten teams in that top 16 is because they didn't get, as a league, didn't get the job done outside the conference. Purdue was one of the few teams to actually have a good non-conference win when they beat Notre Dame in Indianapolis. The only other 2 wins of note in the entire league are Indiana's wins over Kentucky and North Carolina. That's why the Big Ten is not, they may have a lot of teams, but a high seed is probably not realistic.
Well, I'm looking at this potential projected Syracuse-Michigan State matchup, and I want you to peel back the orange on the orange.
Yeah, well, Syracuse was left for dead a few weeks ago in terms of tournament hopes, but then they had a 5-game winning streak, includes Florida State and Virginia. They won their first 2 road games of the year and gave themselves some life, but they've got 3 bad losses. They've got a low RPI because their strength of schedule isn't really all that great. So this is a team that had to get hot and stay hot. They've done the get hot part. Now they got to stay hot.
I'm a little surprised that you have Michigan State, even as a first 4 team. Obviously not a great day today for the Big Ten as far as where they are as a conference. At 14-10, Jerry, in a so-so power league, and you still have them in. Why?
It's a 68-team field, man. You got to have somebody. But 14-10 is an important number because the committee hasn't put a team in the field that's below 4 games above 500 in the 23 years I've been doing this. And the other important number that teams with 10 losses have to worry about is 14 overall losses. 7 teams in 23 years, 5 of them in 2011, which was the first year of the 68-team field, and none since. So you get to 14 losses, you're going to be pretty nervous on Selection Sunday.
All right, so that's Jerry Palm's look at the East region. Let's turn our attention now to the West region, Jerry, and see how you filled out the rest of the bracket following Gonzaga, Oregon, Virginia, and West Virginia.
And here we've got another team that has breathed life into their tournament season, and that's Oklahoma State, who started Big 12 play 0-6, then won 5 games in a row. That included a game in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. Lost their last game, but still, those 5 wins were important for Oklahoma State to have a chance. Now, they've got a better opportunity than some of these other teams to try and build up, because the Big 12 has got some higher quality teams where you can get the big win.
See, I'm with you about Florida, because I'm looking at Cincinnati as a 5 seed. I would have Cincinnati at least ahead of Florida on my board. I was quite surprised that they were not in the top 16. Were you surprised?
Yeah, well, I think that Florida is comparable to this team. So for Florida to be 2 lines above seems a bit incongruous. Their best wins are Xavier and SMU, both at home. They also won at Iowa State as a bubble team. But, you know, they don't really have any bad losses. The worst loss is Rhode Island, a team that may or may not make the tournament. This is a team that played really good basketball, and I agree with you. I mean, if Florida's the measuring stick, you're going to find that all of these 5 seeds are pretty comparable to Florida.
I want to take a look at South Carolina. They played 6 games early in the season without their best player, Sindarius Thornwell. How does that factor into where you place them in the bracket?
Yeah, and they lost 3 of those games. So that's, that's important, because those were not great losses. They don't have any terrible losses, but those are games that maybe they could have won. Sindarius Thornwell, obviously a fantastic player. What the committee will do is they'll put a little bit more weight on what they did with him than without him. And since he's coming back, that will be a factor. But you got to keep in mind, they got drilled to Kentucky with him, and they lost a 4-overtime home game to Alabama, who's not a tournament team, with him. So, they've shown that they can be inconsistent with and without him.
All right, Jerry, look at us moving right along. The East and West brackets complete now. We'll take a quick timeout. When we come back, we'll continue with our projections for the Midwest and the South. NCAA March Madness Bracket Preview on CBS is sponsored by Coca-Cola. Taste the feeling. AT&T. And by the Venture Card from Capital One. We are just a few minutes away from our featured matchup of the day. Alabama will host freshman phenom Malik Monk and the Kentucky Wildcats in an SEC clash that is coming up next right here on CBS. But right now, we have some more brackets to fill. So let's take us through the Midwest region, the teams, Jerry, that you have following Kansas, Florida State, Arizona, and Duke.
Yeah, here you see a couple of in-state rivalries in the 8-9 game and down at the bottom, the 2-15 game. But Illinois State representing the Missouri Valley, that's going to be a really tight battle with Wichita State. It'll be interesting to see if one of those teams could get an at-large.
Well, I'm going to take you to the projected opponent for Illinois State, and that's Creighton. They've had an interesting situation. The nation's assist leader, Mo Watson, goes down for the season. How do you evaluate their placement in the bracket, and how do you anticipate the committee handling that injury for Creighton?
It's actually kind of the opposite. It's the same, but it's the opposite of South Carolina, because South Carolina got their guy back, so they get a little bit more weight on what they do with him. Creighton is going to get a little bit more weight from the committee on what they do without Mo Watson. Now, they got a big win at Butler, and that's obviously huge for them because they did that without him. But, Creighton is going to have to play well down the stretch of this season. This is a team that had a profile that deserved a higher seed, and I think they are knocked down because of the absence of Watson.
So the thing that jumps out at me here, you've got Middle Tennessee as an 11 seed. Now, I know you've got them penciled in as your automatic qualifier out of Conference USA, but I see that 11 next to their name, Jerry. It makes me think that you think that if they don't win that conference tournament, they're getting an at-large bid. Am I right?
No, they're wrong. And the reason for that is because even though they've got some nice NIT quality type wins, what they have is 3 bad losses, including 2 of them at home. They just lost at UTEP, who's almost a 300 RPI team. If they need an at-large bid, that means they have to lose in their conference tournament, and because they're the only decent team in Conference USA, that's another bad loss. I'm not sure they've done enough good to overcome 4 bad losses.
All right, guys, 3 regions down, 1 to go. Let's move on and reveal the South region as you see it, Jerry. The teams filling out the region after Baylor, Carolina, Florida, and Butler.
And here you see Wisconsin, gaudy record, not much behind it. They played some good non-conference opponents, didn't beat any of them. That's why they're a 5.
Valparaiso, a team that I've really liked watching. Talk about their resume.
Yeah, their resume is not going to get them in as an at-large team, but that's one of those teams that you have to watch out for when you're filling out their bracket. They've got an NBA guy in Alec Peters who just broke Bryce Drew's all-time scoring record. Watch out for them if they win their conference tournament.
I see Northwestern not only on the board, of course, they've never been to the tournament. You've got them as an 8 seed. So even though they've lost a couple in a row here, Jerry, it seems to be you're pretty confident that they're going to make this thing.
I don't know that I'm really that confident, but they're trying to work off that Cubs mojo. Here's the problem with Northwestern. Their best win right now is Dayton. Dayton is a team that's the bottom half of the bracket team. If Northwestern, 1 month from now, still has Dayton as their best win, they're going to have a very nervous Selection Sunday.
Jerry, I want to talk to you. Mark Hollis said, of course, things can and will fluctuate between now and the end of the season. How much will they fluctuate for you?
Oh, completely. I mean, this, by the end of the day, this is just going to be completely blown up. I don't have a bracket to wad up, but, but you might as well, because it changes really every day. Every time one of these teams plays, it changes good, bad, or indifferent.
99%. How does that
That's
happen?
amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I think she should have to do this again for tomorrow. Do you see a possibility that Gonzaga could be undefeated on Selection Sunday and not be a #1 seed?
No. I would be stunned if Gonzaga was undefeated, especially with quality wins like Florida and Arizona, teams that you figure to be relatively highly seeded, even if Florida doesn't end up at 3.
And your alma mater move up to the 4 line.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten champion could be as high as a 3.
Okay.
But, they've got to find consistency in Purdue's case or quality wins in Wisconsin's case.
Jerry Palm, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you.
Expertise extraordinaire. Next time we do this all, it will be for real. Coming up next, it's game time. Kentucky at Alabama. We will see you back here at halftime. Spiro Dedes and Bill Raftery will have the call from Tuscaloosa after this message and a word from your local station.